Hi guys, at the Brexit inquiry on Monday, we heard from a lot of senior members of different political parties delivering powerful speeches which highlighted the lies being told in the run-up to the vote in 2016 and the damage done to not just the economy but also to communities. The issues facing businesses wishing to import and export, but also how many sectors are struggling to recruit the staff they need. One MP, Sarah Green, read out the experience of a care supplier that is unable to provide sufficient care to those under its roof as it faces a worker shortage. But while those who were against Brexit had a lot to say, a Brexiteer called Adam Holloway, a Tory MP who backed Leave in 2016 and saw his majority double in 2019, was on hand to defend Brexit. Have a listen to what he had to say.
When 65% of the people in my constituency, Gravesham, voted in the 2015 referendum, they cast their votes in favour of leaving the EU, and they did so in the expectation that their views would be respected and in the hope that the government would have the guts to make a success of it. In these ambitions, my constituents have not been well served. Their clear instructions to us here in Parliament were not respected. For years, the government, with a collusion of the civil service, treated Brexit as a gigantic strategic mistake by the people of the United Kingdom, and they saw their role of one of damage limitation.
No, not completely. Okay, so first of all, people were told if we leave the European Union, we can have sunlit uplands. We can have our cake and we can eat it too. Daniel Hannan, as I've mentioned before, talked about no one is suggesting we'll be outside the single market. But that was a lie, or he was misinformed. Then you had Nigel Farage, the king of Brexit, telling people we can sell into the single market without the restrictions, but we can also be like Switzerland, we can be like Norway. And then later on he changed his mind and said, no, we're not going to be like Norway or Switzerland because we don't want to pay to have access to the single market. David Davis talking about, don't worry, we'll be able to trade like before because the German car industry would come and save the day. So people were told things that were completely untrue. And the vote was simply to leave the European Union. Well, the UK left the European Union. So that actually did happen. Now, of course, when he's talking about seeing it as damage limitation, the problem was that leaving the EU is not as simple as it sounds, as we know. There was the whole issue of Northern Ireland. What was going to happen to Northern Ireland? And that bogged down the negotiations. It became difficult to resolve the problem in Northern Ireland. And the European Union was right to say, okay, if you want to leave, right, you can leave, but we need to sort out Northern Ireland first before we can have a trade deal. Because people like Adam here wanted to have a trade deal before sorting out the issue in Northern Ireland.
But in 2019, the electorate had the chance to speak again, returning Boris Johnson with a huge majority, and he respected that mandate and was finally able to deliver Brexit.
What does that mean, deliver Brexit? Because Boris Johnson said, I will get Brexit done. And that was another lie. You know, Boris Johnson lies, big surprise here. But he told people, he convinced people, yes, I'll sort it out. I'll take it off the table. We won't have to discuss Brexit anymore. Well, that was another lie because Brexit hasn't been done. Brexit will never actually be done until the UK rejoins the EU.
It's faintly depressing, really, to be here again, ostensibly debating whether or not the benefits of Brexit have been delivered and if there should be a public inquiry. But in fact, in reality, I think we're really arguing today about whether or not we should ever have voted to leave the EU or if we should rejoin. To me, the single most important benefit of Brexit has been realised, leaving aside some slightly unhappy compromises in the Windsor framework, because our sovereignty has been repatriated.
What the hell does that mean? Of course, he's talking, the uncomfortable truths or uncomfortable problems with the Windsor framework. No mention of the problems facing businesses in Great Britain. No mention about importing or exporting. No mention about staff shortages as a consequence of Brexit. No, sovereignty. We got our sovereignty back. Look, Parliament has said that it was sovereign all the time. Throughout, before and after Brexit, sovereignty, parliamentary sovereignty had not changed. So what sovereignty is he talking about?
Many Remainers seem to view our desire to govern ourselves as at best an outmoded and abstract concept, and at worst a front for baser impulses. Do you know, I came in here earlier, and I took one look at all these articulate advocates of remain or rejoin, and I thought that in the interest of my blood pressure, which I tested this morning, I'm not going to, sorry. No, I'm sure you can address that in your speech. We've heard a lot from you on the subject already.
What a brave Brexiteer. He doesn't want to give way to allow somebody to comment on what he's already said or ask him a question. Wonderful.
It's easy to undervalue sovereignty if in the areas in which it was surrendered to the EU don't actually impact your life.
Okay, well, let's get on to what he's going to say now.
It's easy to disdain patriotism if you're economically and socially mobile and derive your self-worth from a well-paid job.
What the hell does that mean? So people who have a well-paid job or who are mobile are able to say, well, sovereignty is not important. Now, as I said, parliamentary sovereignty has existed before and after the Brexit referendum. So parliamentary sovereignty isn't an issue here. So he's talking about some other type of sovereignty. So I would presume that Adam here would like to leave the United Nations. He would like to leave the World Trade Organization, which, he was one of these no-deal Brexit people who wanted to go down the road of the World Trade Organization. He wants to leave that organization. He wants to leave NATO. I presume he's also against the Pacific trade deal, or joining the Pacific trading bloc that Kemi Badenoch has been trumpeting. I presume he's against that, maybe not. You give up sovereignty when you join these organizations. And the difference when it comes to the European Union is Britain had a veto. You don't have a veto at the WTO. You don't have a veto in this Pacific trading bloc. You don't have a veto at the UN, well, apart from in limited and specific ways. But you surrender sovereignty when you join an international organization. And in some cases you have a veto, and in other cases you don't. The UK had a veto at the EU. It doesn't have a veto in the Pacific Trading Bloc or at the WTO.
Or if your life is made easier by cheap labour as a result of free movement.
Who is he talking about here? Is he talking about voters? Is he talking about businesses? Some businesses, yes, benefited, but the society benefited when people came with immigration. Society as a whole benefits because people come and they contribute to society. They pay taxes. They're consumers. All of these things benefit society. We're seeing the consequences of taking migrants out of the economy, workers out of the economy.
But in my constituency, EU membership has brought with it social problems, pressures on housing, both in...
Pressures on housing. From the Tories talking about pressure on housing. These are the people who sold off public housing and then stopped councils from rebuilding new ones. With the right to buy, we can argue whether right to buy was a good idea or not, but with right to buy, people during the Thatcher years, 1980s, long before any mention of Brexit, the Thatcher years, and this was a British government policy, nothing to do with the EU. Thatcher government sold off all this public housing, allowed people to buy their homes. A lot of people bought their homes and then rented them out or sold them to others who turned them into rented accommodation. And very little public housing was restored. That's one of the reasons why there's a problem of housing at the moment. Nothing to do with the EU.
In the social and private sectors, an enormous stress on public services and a sense of disenfranchisement.
What is he talking about, public services? Is he talking about the NHS? The NHS that is desperately in need of nurses and doctors that it has lost as a result of the pandemic and Brexit?
My constituents aren't crazed nationalists, but are hard-working people who voted to take back control over the laws that directly affect their quality of life.
Such as, what laws? I'd love to hear. Give us a list of these laws that these EU laws that the UK was part of the decision-making process of, that are damaging people in his constituency.
And to have the right to vote out politicians who make laws that don't work for them.
What? Like David Frost? You know, that guy who was elected. Oh, no, he wasn't elected. Rishi Sunak, he wasn't elected Prime Minister. Of course, you know, you don't elect the Prime Minister. But, you know, there wasn't even a vote within the Conservative Party for Rishi Sunak. You know, the House of Lords is unelected. Does he have a problem with the House of Lords? Probably not. You don't hear about the Conservatives getting rid of the House of Lords. So when it comes to certain unelected individuals or individuals, they're okay with that. But when it comes to Europe, when it comes to the European Union, like for example, the chair and the board of the World Trade Organization are not elected by the people.
This power is important to them, and it's important to me that we deliver on that promise. In terms of the economic benefits of Brexit, we should have the courage of our convictions and stop being so cautious.
So there aren't any economic benefits. They will arrive sometime in the future, if the right conditions exist. Didn't see that on the side of a bus. They didn't say, yes, we will actually benefit economically if, and then a list of conditions. No, that was a lie, another lie.
It was encouraging to hear Jeremy Hunt unveil his post-Brexit reform of financial services, which aims to give us a regulatory framework that meets the needs of our financial services industry and which could respond effectively to emerging trends.
How does this affect members, or hard-working people in his constituency? Remember earlier on he said, members of my constituency are not racists or nationalists or whatever. They're hard-working people, working class people, I imagine, or middle class people. How are these people impacted? How are they benefiting from these so-called Brexit benefits?
With the freedom to diverge from EU law, we can now make substantial changes in many areas to things like the regulation of insurance firms. The risk margin, a capital buffer that insurance companies must hold, will be cut by 65% for life insurers and 30% for general insurers. And their eligibility of assets that life insurers can use to match their liabilities will therefore be broadened. This will free up capital for investment in the UK economy and improve the competitiveness of the important financial services industry, bringing benefits to consumers.
You think it's going to come to consumers and not shareholders? We're removing safeguards built in to protect the consumer, removing those safeguards, and we're sure that the consumer will benefit from the removal of those safeguards. Yes, it will allow these insurance companies to make bigger profits, and of course, bigger profits means lower prices. No, it doesn't really work like that, Adam. I thought you'd be a capitalist. Generally, it's bigger profits, more money for shareholders. If you don't believe me, look at what's happening with the water companies.
But the government must stick to its promise to make substantial legislative progress in this area over the course of 2023. Reform of the financial services regulations is just one area where we now have the freedom to extricate ourselves from a regime that was not designed with our best interests in mind.
But you were part of the decision making. Now you're saying it's not in our benefit. Benefit, when you say our, do you mean the British people, or do you mean your donors?
But there are a host of opportunities we must now seize. We must make progress with the retained EU law bill, and we must take advantage of our freedom from EU control of state aid. And we must make sure our immigration system works for the people of this country. It's a difficult task to disentangle us from a heap of legislation we did not choose, but it's a vital job, and we should be bold and move quickly.
And a lie right at the end. We didn't choose. Yes, you did choose it. You were part of the decision-making process in Brussels, and you decided these laws when you were in government in Westminster. So there you have it. The benefit of Brexit is sovereignty. He doesn't know what sovereignty means. He doesn't know what parliamentary sovereignty means. And sovereignty is like, we take back control of something. Absolutely pathetic. And notice that he wouldn't allow anyone to ask him questions. He wanted to deliver his speech and then leave. Basically just read something and then walk out of the room. Brexiteers are not good at facing the music, are they? Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.